Why is the economic freedom fighters calling for the nationalization of banks without compensation? Would the nationalization of banks be in the best interest of the country? How will South Africans benefit from the EFF's proposed Banks Ownership Act? What is the EFF position on the mandate of the South African Reserve Bank? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host Bonge Kwala, standing in for Mpotsedu today. Political parties have rejected calls by the economic freedom fighters to nationalize banks without compensation. Members of Parliament poured cold water over the EFF's motion that was debated in the National Assembly last night. Democratic Alliance's Member of Parliament David Maynier described the call to nationalize banks without compensation as not only just a bad idea, but also a mad idea. Defending his party's stance, EFF leader Julius Malema said banks controlled many aspects of people's lives, including property and cars, but they refused to transform. For its part, the Banking Association of South Africa called on the National Treasury to provide certainty about its policy position regarding banks. We're live, therefore you can call us and air your views on the number. The number is 089-110-4210. If you are abroad, international number is +27 89-110-4210. Or you can tweet us. Your comments very welcome at Question Time 24. My guest is Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, who is EFF spokesperson, and he's joining us from our Durban studio. And hopefully we'll be joined by Lebogang Pheko, who is Senior Research Fellow at Trade Collective. But for now, let's say hello to Mr. Ndlozi, Dr. Ndlozi, as we know it. Hello.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to the viewers and to yourself.
All right, before we get into this discussion, let's have a look at what Julius Malema, your leader, had to say yesterday in Parliament.
These banks own and control the houses, cars and properties of so many people in South Africa. The banks own land and huge commercial properties such as malls and industrial parks. Banks control and run the lives of so many people.
All right, there you have it, EFF leader Julius Malema talking about nationalizing the banks. Dr. Ndlozi, good to have you on the line, in fact, from our Durban studio. Let's hear from you. Why are you calling for the nationalization of the banks?
Well, as you have indicated in the clip, there are two basic reasons. The first one has to do with the fact that a lot of the economic activities that majority of South Africans are engaged in are controlled by the banks. A lot of the things that South Africans live by every day are controlled by the banks, which in most of the cases don't allow them to ultimately own them. The homes, the cars, our degrees are all owned, or we get access to those things through the money that is in the banks. Yet the banks, as you know, they control about 12 trillion rands of assets in South Africa. And these banks remain untransformed. So the first reason why a democratically elected state must have some form of a voice in those banks have to do with a transformation agenda from their wide dominated past. Secondly, it has to do with the fact of investing in the lives of black people, investing in black entrepreneurs in townships, investing in the businesses of rural black women, and leading industrialization. We have a very abnormal situation in South Africa wherein we've got a lot of money in the banks, yet we always go around the world looking for investments to lead industrial, meaningful development that has actual impact in terms of producing sustainable jobs, when we have the banks that have that money. So that's the second reason why we believe that we must have a say in the life of the investments and our ability, as it were, to borrow from our own future, which is what the banks essentially control.
How do you propose
we've also indicated that this nationalization.
How do you propose that the country goes about? Yeah, I'm asking, how do you propose that this is done, the nationalization of the banks? Who needs to drive this process of nationalizing banks?
It's a democratically elected state that must have 51% of shares in the major banks, the commanding banks in South Africa, and it must acquire this without compensation. Well, for the basic reason that the government doesn't have the money, but also for a historic reason that we've got to be able, in order to address the imbalances of the past, we have to step into that particular space to transform these banks and transform the ways in which they invest in the economic activities of black people.
And who owns these banks?
I didn't get that.
Who own the banks in South Africa? The ownership of the banks. Who own the banks in South Africa?
Well, at the moment, the banks belong mainly to private and to predominantly white people. And in some instances, multinational corporations like Bank of China own some of the shares in some of the banks in South Africa. For an example, as we gave an indication yesterday, the Bank of China owns shares in Standard Bank. So it's multinational corporations on one hand, it is private citizens, but it's predominantly part of what constitutes white minority wealth in South Africa.
You see, the reason why I'm asking that, precisely because it's private money. It's money that comes from foreign countries, people who decide to come and invest in South Africa. Doesn't that tell you that there is confidence in this country, in the stability of the country, that foreign money will come and be invested here? Why would you want to nationalize private money that comes from other countries, that comes to and suggest that South Africa is a stable democracy, therefore we can put our money here?
Well, it's a convoluted question. First of all, we are not proposing wholesale nationalization. We are proposing 51%, and we stated yesterday in Parliament in no equivocal terms that there should continue to be private ownership, there should continue to be all forms of ownership that exist, including pension, including through the PIC and so on and so forth. So we are not advocating wholesale nationalization. Now, the second aspect of your question has to do with the fact that you seem to suggest that if we nationalize, we are not democratic. And I keep emphasizing to you that it must be a democratic process. Even the CIC indicated it must be through an act of parliament that goes through the process of deliberative democracy, and it's entertained in parliament through public consultations and ultimately passed as a law through what we call the Bank Ownership Act. So we are not going to just expropriate in an anarchic way. It will be through a democratic process. And to that extent, that should still continue to give people confidence that we are running a democratic state. The final aspect is that there is actually a lot of foreign direct investment that comes to South Africa. If there is anything that we should learn for the last 23 years, is that we are actually not getting enough money from foreign direct investment in order to lead industrial development. That's why we believe that we've got to change the macroeconomic framework and bring the state into the center of leading industrial development in South Africa, and that must start with having a state bank and having a share in the banks which control a lot of money in South Africa that we need in order to redirect it into investments into those spaces that the banks are not investing in, which is into factories that are going to give our people, in particular poor black people who live in townships and urban and rural areas, sustainable jobs. That's the wisdom of this argument.
We got you. Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is the spokesperson for the EFF. He's in our Durban studio. But let's take Yutin, who is in Sunning Hill. Yutin, hello.
A very good day, sir. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. How are you doing?
Very well, sir. Good day to the Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, our leader in the EFF.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good day to you too.
Yes, leadership. I would like to just find out. This is very uplifting what you are doing right now, educating our people about our policies in nationalization of banks. But my leader, I would like to ask, how do we engage the white people of South Africa, to get them to join us in understanding the policies and the manifesto of the EFF, getting them to understand that the nationalization of banks is not about us stealing the money, but more about taking care of the majority of the people and not only taking care of the minority. Thank you very much.
All right, Mbuyiseni, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think that the wisdom of tabling this motion in Parliament is precisely, it's not just about white people, it's about everybody in South Africa. And you see, yesterday, you could see that there is a struggle in the public psyche of South Africa of thinking that it is taboo to nationalize a bank. And we gave examples of Britain, we gave examples of China, we gave examples, and if we had more time, we could give examples of the United States, the examples of Switzerland, and many other countries where there's been state-owned banks. And these countries, we put them in Parliament to both the DA and the ANC that in any way forwarded white members to come and argue in defense of or to argue against our motion. And in their defense, both the DA and the ANC kept going for examples in the continent, in Ghana, in Tanzania, in Kenya, and ignored the examples of China and Britain of state-owned banks. Right. Why? It's a dishonesty that has a motivation, in our view, that is essentially anti-black, that what they really fear is not so much that something will be ran by a democratically elected state, but that the people who are running that state are black. But we still need to disabuse a lot of both black people and white people from anti-black racism to understand that this is a viable economic policy that has worked not only in developing countries but also in developed countries.
But are you not rehashing what has been said? For instance, you're talking on the other side of your mouth about nationalizing banks, but you're also talking about a state bank that needs to be constituted from within. That call has been made already by among others, the ANC. ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, has said there must be a state bank. They are pushing for that. Itala, which is a development agency there, is being pushed to be one of the state banks. The post office also, there's a call for it to be turned into a full-on state bank. So why make this call now, and why make a call that suggests that there must be nationalization, but also on the other hand, you're calling for a state bank?
Well, first of all, it's not now, and the EFF formed in 2013 already. This is not part of our non-negotiable cardinal pillars. Already in 2013, when we formed, we called for the nationalization of banks. In our founding manifesto, we called for the development of a state bank. That's two things, and we did that as well in Parliament yesterday, and the ANC unfortunately disagreed. So there's no ANC that agreed with the nationalization of banks, at least in relation to what we had yesterday in Parliament. And what's important here is that the new developing banks can happen, and we are in full support of that, of giving a full banking license to Itala, full banking license to the Post Bank. But we are saying that at the commanding heights of the economy, there must still be the role that a democratic state, an accountable, corrupt-free democratic state plays in the redirection of what is already fully developed banks that are big fish, that are big players, that are playing in the majority of our lives. They own majority of our lives. They own our capacity to have, they provide better housing than the government. They provide better health care than the government. They are now moving with speed in relation to funding private education as well as higher education. So these banks are already in charge of our lives. There's no reason not to move in, but also for a second reason, so that the investments that they are making are not just moving to predominantly white lives and white communities. They must begin to give black entrepreneurs and black ideas investments, but also invest in rural communities, in black communities, and that's another fundamental reason why we need to have a say in the commanding banks.
Felix, you are in Mbombela in Nelspruit. Hello.
Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh yes, EFF is it's a party in which I really have a hope on, and I do believe that they are the hope for the black people in this country, because I believe strongly that ANC is dead. But I have a worry. Now, my worry is this: EFF seems not to get this point, that the wealth that has been created by whites, indicative of the money and the bank they own now, is the wealth that has been created by them. Creativity is endless. What we need to do is to educate and skill aggressively our black people, so that we can unleash their creative potential. Who told you that the wealth that the white has created today is the end of all the wealth that can be created? And that's where my problem is. EFF must focus now on aggressively educating and empowering the black to unleash their creative potential. Creativity is endless. It's infinite. What the white has created is nothing compared to what can be created by the blacks if they are educated and skilled and empowered. So we should not go after taking their wealth. We are not interested in it. We should not be interested in it, because we know we can do better than them. We only need to be skilled, to be educated, and to be empowered.
All right, Felix in Mbombela, Nelspruit, thank you very much. And Dr. Ndlozi, thanks for staying with us. I know that you have to leave, but perhaps let me just ask this question before you leave, whether in your view, in EFF, everything that is owned by white is evil. That's number one. Number two, do you appreciate the role that the private sector plays in the economy of this country? And also, earlier on, you alluded to a lot of foreign direct investment that comes into this country. Are you also going to call for that? Because I make a suggestion that a lot of this money in the banks comes from overseas, so it's a foreign direct investment in the country. Are you going to ask for the nationalization of those companies as well?
Well, first of all, let's dispel the myth that the wealth in South Africa is created by white people. That's unfortunately not true. Our people have been part of the development of this country. Black people have worked very hard to build all the wealth that we can think of, beginning in the days of industrial capital in the mining sector, from Kimberley to the gold mines, including the platinum mines at the moment in the platinum belt from Marikana to Limpopo. Our people are active in contributing through their labor, through their ideas, through their creativity, in contributing to building the wealth. Majority of the people of this country are black people. So the majority of the people who are banking in ABSA, the majority of the people who are banking in Standard Bank and all of these banks are black people. So we're not talking about white wealth. We're talking about the wealth of this country. We're talking about the wealth that has been generated through gold, the wealth that had been generated through platinum. Those minerals did not come with white people. They found them beneath the soil of this continent, and we've been party in the production of that wealth. Now the call is that we should share in that wealth, and that wealth has not worked to advance the lives of black people who have been part of the development of the economy because of apartheid and racism. So we must dispel the idea that that is white wealth. It is not white wealth. Secondly, we must dispel the fact that we are not being able to share in that wealth because we are undereducated. There are thousands and thousands of young people who have got matric. They are sitting at home without jobs. There are thousands and thousands of black entrepreneurs with great ideas, educated black entrepreneurs. They've got the perfect business plans. They can't get funding from banks. Not because they don't have good ideas, not because they are not educated, but simply because they are black.
Sure.
And lastly, there are a lot of educated black people who are standing on the streets, not begging for money, begging for jobs with degrees. So it's not true that the problem of South Africa is a skill. The people who are building the TVs, millions of TVs that we are watching in South Africa, they don't even have matric, who stand on the factory lines in China, in Malaysia, building the cell phones that we use, don't even have matric. The problem of jobs in South Africa is not skills. The problem of jobs in South Africa is that the banks are not investing in the factories that are supposed to be giving us the jobs. That's why we need to step in there and redirect the investments into those factories.
We got you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ndlozi. I know I have to let you go. Thanks for the additional 5 minutes that you gave us. I wish I could engage with you further, but that's where we're going to have to leave it with the spokesperson for EFF, Dr. Ndlozi. Bongani, you are on the line from KZN. Hello.
Radio. No, I'm just, I wanted to know if the doctor, but now I hear that the doctor has left. So this is how best can they engage the youth that is from the ANC, taking young people, especially that the ANC has got this rhetoric, let me not call it a rhetoric, this radical economic transformation, because this is actually radical economic transformation in action. Why can't they actually try to engage the young people, especially from the ANC, since it's the majority party, even also engage these other young people from the white formation and all that? Oh. I don't know, but now that the doctor is gone,
the good doctor is gone, Bonga, and I hope your question will be answered. But let's stay with this topic. We're discussing a call by the economic freedom fighters. They're calling for the nationalization of banks without compensation. Do you agree with this sentiment? You can call us in studio, of course, if you know the number. This is Question Time. We're coming back right now.
Show me a greater power on the whole continent of Africa. Show me a greater power anywhere.
6th of June 1918 was the establishment of our movement to maintain that.
We need to do something about the educational upliftment of the Afrikaner, and we also need to do something about the economic upliftment of the Afrikaner. And that was the two main goals at that stage in 1918.
The Broederbond never was a cultural organization. It was a state-capturing organization. It is, in fact...
I like that term.
It has captured the financial systems. It has captured the parastatals. It has captured cultural organizations.
For all your constitutional and legal matters, tune into Rights and Recourse on Sundays between 2 and 3 Central African Time.
All right, political parties have rejected calls by the EFF to nationalize banks without compensation. What is your view about this as we continue with Question Time today? And that's our topic for our discussion. Let's have a look at some comments by the opposition parties, party MPs, about Julius Malema's call to nationalize South African banks.
It is easy to put a motion like this on the order paper and make headlines. It is much harder to justify the implications of such a motion.
The idea of nationalizing the banks without compensation is not just a bad idea, it is a mad idea that would crush the hopes of the 9.4 million people who do not have jobs.
The capacity of the state in running SOEs, because hindsight is the best sight, is the biggest lesson in which we now need to be in as South Africa. There is a culture of a collapse of these entities, corruption and incompetence. The question then becomes, does the state have the capacity to even begin to run these banks? It's an emphatic no.
And parliamentarians interacting with Julius Malema's call, or EFF's calls, for the banks to be nationalized without compensation. Wanga, you are on the line. Hello to you. Okay, that line to Wanga has dropped. But your view generally about this call by the EFF for the banks to be nationalized without compensation. Of course, you know that they made this call about the mines as well. And we had Dr. Ndlozi here who said that there's a lot of FDI in this country. Do we then nationalize the rest of the money, foreign money that comes into South Africa? Your views, please, will be welcome. And that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. A big thank you to my guests. There was Dr. Ndlozi in Durban, and to you at home, of course, for watching. Question Time will return again tomorrow on Thursday. My name is Bonge Kwala. It's been great sharing Question Time with you. That's where we're going to have to leave it. Good night.